All right, so I'm going to do a video about what I think about the current state of art AIs. First off, I think they're pretty much all illegal. I think that they are wrongly set up and they are stealing from hundreds of thousands of artists all across the world. I also think they're an incredibly useful service, and I use them, but I have a very limited sense of how I will use them. I have their commercial license because I'm paying for their services because I produce enough images that I want to do that. But there's some standards that I apply that I'm never going to release commercial stuff based on it, or that is built from it, or re-release them as asset packs. I think because of the fact that we'll demonstrate this, why I think they're illegal, that any licensing of the AI engines to produce this stuff is going to become null and void, and I will lose any type of permissions that I have paid for. So that'd be a horrible practice to base a business on. Okay, so there's a couple premises that people tend to believe in about the AIs, and a lot of it is being, some of it is kind of true, but it's not, and I want to dispel some of these myths. AIs learn like we do. No, that has pretty much never happened. Oh, I know I'm gonna get a lot of comments that are gonna say immediately about that, like, no, they're based off of all sorts of stuff on psychology and cognitive ability and understanding of how the brain works. They're based on that. They are designed on purpose to mirror the way that we learn. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So what do I mean? I'll get to that. But the general idea is that they're not learning brush strokes. They're not learning the shapes of things. They are learning pixel alignment. Okay, AIs aren't copying the work. That's another myth that I'll get to. We're not copying the work. We're training an AI model. An AI model is built up of pixels that we copied from hundreds of thousands of images and put them together in a very particular format so that it's no longer the original images. If we're copying pixels from 100,000 places and we're superimposing them on each other, that's not the original works, right? No, I'm going to demonstrate that is not the case. Those don't represent new original works. It represents theft on a larger basis. So AIs are legal is the next one. The AIs like art AIs. And through those other two, I'm going to demonstrate that they're not. And then businesses should be able to trust and use the commercial licenses that they've purchased from them. And I disagree with that. I am going to explain why I can't trust that next year any license from Midjourney, from DALL-E, from whatever AI art engine I use is going to be legal. I think we're going to see the lawsuits start to occur and these companies get torn apart. Now, I also believe that there is an entire model of how we can address this, how we can deal with this, that still allows this to work, allows the AIs to produce art for us that is entirely opt-in. And I want to explain how that works. And then I also want to explain the fact that we're just going to be slapping all of our artist friends in the face by going along with everything from these art AIs. Okay, so let's go back to the basics. AIs aren't copying the work. That's one of the first things because they learn differently. Now, this is complicated to explain because it's complicated in what goes on underneath the hood. And I'm going to have to explain a little bit about like wave function collapse in order to explain that, because I can't guarantee that all of the AIs are using wave function collapse to help generate their images, but the artifacts that they leave behind are clear indicators of it, or that they're using a system that does almost the same type of work. And plus a whole variety of other systems to help them out with it. But I'm going to explain some of that so you understand how it's putting these pieces together, how it's learning some of these fragments. Now, it's an isolated silo of how it works, and there's lots of other stuff. And by all means, maybe I'm missing a point on this and I'm not understanding, but I have built some of these things. Not any of the current image AIs that are out there, but I've built some of the AIs that some of this stuff appears to be based on. Okay, let's start at the beginning. AIs aren't copying the work. They are. let's demonstrate first what a human copying the work would be. I'm going to go over to Time magazine and I'm going to grab a cover picture with Adele on it. Copy image, and I'm going to start up Paintbrush and I'm going to paste it into Paintbrush. I'm going to stretch that out a little bit so it's bigger, and there, this is my image. I just changed it. Look, right, it's not the same pixels. They're stretched out, they're deformed a little bit. If I superimpose that other one on top of it, you'll see that they don't really line up anymore. That's my image, right? I can now post that online and put a license attached to it and that says you have to pay me to be able to use this. No, we understand, we know that that doesn't work. Okay, what if I did this? This is going to be, this will be the clincher, right? I'm going to copy over one with Billie Eilish on it as well. So let's copy this one. Oh wait, let's copy the larger image. Copy, and then let's paste that in there too. Now that was a little bit on the large side, so I'm just going to stretch that out over here and put that over here and then stretch it this way. Now I don't have the ability to erase this by 50% in Paintbrush. But let's say that I did. Let's say that I took this image and I pasted it on top, but only at 50% transparency. So every pixel inside of this is now 50% the original image and 50% this new one. That's a new image, right? Because not any one of the pixels that I took are from a single picture alone. No, we would look at that and we would immediately recognize, oh yeah, I still see the Time cover on there. This is not new work. This is copying and pasting and doing some filters on it. So we recognize that. Okay, now let's say that I still had that 50% that 50% transition between one to the other. So I'm never using just a single image by itself. And I now go through the painstaking work of zooming in, and I am going to copy some of these pixels out. I'm going to start here, and I want to grab 3 by 3. Well, 3 by 3 is actually a little bit hard in Paintbrush to get because it can't zoom in that far. And my mouse is a little bit sensitive. There, 3 by 3. Control C, and I'm going to Control V this. But now I've got this piece right here. No. Hey, show me that one. Come on. Wow, that really got messed up. Anyway, but let's say that I took these fragments and I just took them like 9 pixels at a time and I started copying and pasting them one by one all over the image or all over a new image. Am I copying and pasting? Am I still dependent on the source images? Yes. Yes. This is what the AIs are doing. No. You're going to argue that that's not what they're doing, especially once you start looking into the neural network of how the AIs work. They're not storing pixel information. They're storing information about how pixels adjacent to other pixels, when they're combined in certain patterns and starting from smaller, more focused ones to larger, more broad strokes on it, that starts to assemble the idea of an image, right? That's what I was told. But that's not really what's happening. How does it actually figure those out? Wave function collapse is the AI that I'm going to choose to discuss on this one. I don't know that all the art AIs are dependent on some form of wave function collapse, or if they've got something else entirely that they're using. What they're doing underneath the hood is their own work. But the fragments left behind in the images, especially when we see stuff that looks weird, is the exact same type of stuff you get from wave function collapse. So I'm going to discuss that because even if it's not the same thing, the principles are still likely the same, or very close. If we have 3 pixels lined up, so I'm not even going to bother with it, but yeah, whatever. I'll do this and I'll say I have a pixel over here that's black, I have another pixel over here that's black, I have a pixel over here that's black, and then I've got white, 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 and white, white, white. So a 3 by 3 section of pixels. All I need to do to make wave function collapse work is if I put this randomly somewhere on my image, I can now take wave function collapse and say, find me any other fragment of pixels that says where I will match one of these borders, Go find that. So it looks around the image, it starts comparing it, and there's faster ways to do this. This is just a way to explain it. And it says, oh, I found another one that has white and black at the bottom, or white at the bottom and then black in the middle. And the black continues over to the next one, but then it turns to, I can't show red here, then it turns to yellow here and yellow here and yellow here and yellow here and yellow here for those pixels. So it can overlap them on this part. Wave function collapse is effectively saying, hey, in this type of image, when you see a clump of pixels like this, and you can see another set where it's got an edge like this, you can overlap those edges, and you know that that is a natural way that that image might expand. You might end up with some weird proportions. You might end up with some points where the makeup on the edge of the cheekbone ends up looking a lot like the eyebrow, and so the eye ends up being in the middle of the cheek or off to the side or slightly larger on one side. And you see these weird oddities start showing up inside of your images. This is very similar to how it's learning as well. When I was talking about initially taking two images and putting them on top of each other, we recognized very clearly that if you just superimpose those images and then just copy and paste fragments of those, that's still copying from the source material. Let's take one step back from this and say, what if I took any one of those major AI systems and I trained them with only one image? And then I told it to create me an image. You want to bet that that image is going to look almost identical to the first image that you trained it with? A lot of these AIs actually warp the images that they come in with. They'll do alterations on it just at a basic level just to make sure it really doesn't look like the originals. But if it's just one image that AI system was trained on, it is really obvious that that picture came from that source material. And you could not get away from that in court. If you were to say, well, I used this software, I entered this image into this software to train this AI, and then I took the AI, what the AI spit out. No, we know very obviously that that is a copy, even if it was training a neural net on how that was supposed to work. It trained it to make the fragments of images and pixels match up with this original image. Oh, okay, well, let's put two pictures in there now. So it's not just like one thing that it's pulling that from. It's now two images, right? That now we're not copying and pasting anymore. No, we've already been over that. We know that that's not the case. Oh, wait, we'll do this with 20,000 pictures. That's better, right? If we take those pixels from 20,000 different sources to help identify what patterns we should be pulling in to reproduce our images, why does it somehow change when you're stealing from more people? If you do this to 1 or 2 people, it's stealing. But if you do this to 20 million people, it's somehow a viable business option. I mean, just on that understanding alone would be easy enough to call it. But then, yes, they absolutely are storing this stuff. So when art AIs are being trained, every image that comes through it is assigned a percentage of value. And a way to look at this is to say that they have 200,000 images of a particular thing that they're going to be passing in. Some are good, some are bad, or don't represent the thing, some do. And so they pass these images in. And then the AI comes back and says, well, let's say that this is good, that this is a yes, or this is a no, trying to identify the patterns that they're looking at to see, is this a cat, is this a dog, is this a tank, whatever keywords are associated with it. We take that information and we're putting it into these pixel forms, and then we say, okay, well, that's going to be 1/200,000th. This source image over here represents 1/200,000th of that pixel pattern that we're going to use. And then we're going to go over to another image, and that next image will also represent 1/200,000th of the training of the AI. How is that not copying and pasting? You're imposing fragments of these where you can use the waveform collapse to identify that when we have patterns and sequences like this showing up in the original one, by taking copies of those pixels from the original pictures, and then looking at them and saying, well, now we're going to look at another one and say, well, this image also has that, and so we're going to store that pixel combination. We're going to maybe remove the colors. We're going to allow it to flip it around and stuff like that and see like what other angles that might come in from. But we're going to train our AI by basically just taking copies of all this and putting in an average at the end. A neural network is basically a whole bunch of these little nodes that kind of cross-connect, and then each one of them is just a simple decision maker, a very simple decision maker, and it puts it on like a float value for every single, a decimal place value, to kind of define when I'm getting a 1 from this and I'm getting a 0 from this one and a 1 from that one, then I have a 30% chance of saying that I need to pass out a 1 on to the next things that are looking at me. And those pass through enough filters like that, and you start to get this intelligent shape of what's going on. But that idea of waveform collapse, like we've used waveform collapse a lot. Like you've seen this in some of the classic video games, like StarCraft or Warcraft, where you basically see you're making a new map. You go ahead and have all dirt tiles to begin with, and you put a grass tile in there. What happens? It finds tiles that have dirt and grass on it and goes to those 8 ones on the side. You start with that center pixel, that center tile. You remember that one? Oh, no, not there. These pixels, these 3x3 patterns, and you can change the size and shape of that, whatever. But you look at that overlap and you find similarities to put them together. And so same thing with this. We find, okay, I put a grass that didn't work. Print screen. Will print screen work with this? Let's do this and find out. Print screen. Okay, so over here, I've got a grass tile I just put in here. So what it does is it looks to see, do I have a corner piece over here where it goes down to the below ground? Do I have another piece over here where it also touches the ground? Do I have another piece on that I can find that mixes grass and dirt on this side? Over here, it's just another grass tile. That's easy. I'll just grab the same tile. Wave function collapse is a quantum physics-based approach to dealing with that. And I'm not planning on going into the details of that, but it's basically saying that every tile starts out as every possible tile, and then once you put a neighboring or an adjacent tile to it, that starts to limit the possibilities of what it can be. And that's used in parts of the explanations of why physics changes when you observe it. Okay, so we've got this, and we know that this type of system works. We've used this for a while. But wave function collapse does some really amazing things. So I'm going to back out of this one. And I'm referencing this MXGMN. They did a great article on this. It really showed some examples that are incredible. Where basically they're just grabbing these source images here, like based from these set of images, they now can produce all of this by just randomly assembling fragments of these together, rotating 90 degrees, testing in different ways to see how else it can collapse and connect these things. But it's still using the source image. So what if if this source pixel over here, this source little image that it has, was imposed from 8 different sources? Just remember that if you put one image into training the AI, the output is going to be that same image, almost identical. Certainly close enough to pass off in court and say, no, those absolutely are from the same image. You couldn't use that AI to produce something new. Okay, so given this, what are some of the ways that they're getting around this? First of all, you can copy and paste any artwork you want to online. It's all legal until you get sued for it. That's one of the things. Until it goes to court, there's a lot of open questions, and sometimes there'll be landmark cases where they start to identify new ways to look at the law and change the perspective of it. But this stuff is pretty well standardized. Like we know this stuff. There's international law supporting it that is recognized by most countries in the world, of how you deal with copyrights, of how you take an original material and you have to support those licenses. You can't just take it and use it however you want. You have to make sure that you are within their license boundaries. Okay. Now, another thing is they like to say that our AIs learn like people do. And there's a very strong truth to that they do learn like people do, because they have studied the way that human brains work and the way that different cells work and how they cross-connect in the nervous structures inside of your system, and studying of psychology in their brain to come up with this entire map of how all this stuff works. And then they based a lot of AI on this exact set of patterns that we have studied and observed in human brains. So yes, from the core of it, it learns like humans do. So what's the difference between an AI going out and studying these things and learning from this to create a training model and then coming out and doing this stuff versus a college student going to college for a few years to study and learn how to do these things and get some experience in it and practice to come out into the business world and start making money doing these things? What's the difference between that? Well, the first thing is that if you asked an AI to create a bunny, you're not going to get one of these. I mean, if you specifically asked for the starting drawing patterns of creating a bunny, then maybe it might find those and produce the same type of thing. But that's not what's happening. It's not going through producing the original line strokes. It doesn't care about how you move a paintbrush or resize a rectangle or copy and paste a gradient in or change your color to a gradient pattern. It doesn't care about that stuff. It's using image patterns. It's using patterns of pixels and how they change, both in color and in black and white pattern structures, to define what pixel set goes next to another one. And when you have enough of those changes clumped together, it suddenly represents a particular keyword. It's not learning the circles. It's not learning the shapes. It's not learning the shadows. It's learning pieces of it that it copied from all this other stuff. And there's tools that developers have written for these AIs to help them understand these things better, to help them get to it faster and easier and separate things out in a more intelligent way. But it's still copying that source material. That is one of the key differences of how it learns compared to us. We don't learn by doing pixel by pixel work, unless of course you're a pixel artist. And that is very much a real thing, a valuable thing. There's a lot of games that have an entire art style built off of this. And you can find some incredible stuff there. But unless you happen to be doing that specific thing, you are typically not approaching your work from pixel by pixel basis. If you are producing a digital image, if you have 20 years of experience, you're one of the best people or most popular people over on like DeviantArt or ArtStation, or producing art packs for Unreal and the Unity asset stores, you have this incredible skill base to produce this stuff. But it's not like you just go in there and just immediately bright each pixel once and you're done. You are not just copying your stuff. Every time you make a digital change, you apply a filter, you apply a hue shift, you go ahead and copy and paste segments of it from other licensed material you have paid for or created yourself. But you grab elements of that and you put them together. Or you have 3D models. You have an engine that puts them and places them and layers them and puts effects in the way and shaders. The image AIs are not reproducing those layers. They are not doing that. By the time you've released one of your masterpiece artworks, one of your ones that comes from 20 years of experience, 30 years of experience, and maybe you would charge $10,000 or more, and you post it over on ArtStation so people can see and admire this work and study from it and learn from it, you're effectively, I mean, you can't just give that to someone else has no art skill and say, go ahead and copy this and expect them to copy it and get anything even remotely close to that. Not unless they're literally copying pixels over. So what you've earned in skills really matters here. Okay. So I think by now I've probably represented the case that AIs right now are not legal. Like, let's demonstrate this a little farther. Let's say I'm friends with Thomas Kincaid. And if you're not familiar with Thomas Kincaid, let me show you. How to draw a bunny. Thomas Kincaid has a very definitive art style. Look at this. It's cottagecore, and it's really vibrant, rich cottagecore. You look at these different images and they stand out. You've got this really nice cloud systems. I mean, you can look at it as different clouds, and there's kind of a common pattern that you see through a lot of these. And then you look at other things related to it, and you see like, okay, look at these greens for the grasses that come out, the shadows of the light, the water that's passing by. You see all of this stuff from Thomas Kincaid, and it looks so nice. Now, let's say I'm friends with him, and I say, hey, Thomas, I would like to create a tank Armada video game, but I want the countryside that they're rolling around in to look like your art. I would love for you to paint some backdrops for my game. Could you do that? And then we give them some specifics, and he might say something like, sure, Dan, we can do this. That'll be $20,000. It's going to take me about 3 weeks of time to produce each piece because this is painted. This is hand painted. I'm doing real work on this to build this. It's not just like digital. And I'm not trying to say that digital stuff is not real work, but you can't undo. Not in the same way I'm painting. You don't get to get mass filters so much in this type of stuff. So anyway, he's producing this artwork, and then he comes back with a price like $8,000, $20,000, maybe more. And I'm like, whoa, wait, that's a lot of money. And he goes, well, this is the type, my art makes a lot of money. And then I go, well, you know what? The AIs, they've already looked at how your pixels, they've copied over your pixels, how they line up with each other, and they've trained their AIs, so they're storing a way to regenerate that structure of pixels it got from your images by looking at copies of your pixels. And they're going to give this to me a commercial license for like $8 a month, and I can produce a near unlimited number of images that way, a couple hundred images a day. I'm not going to have to pay you a cent for that. If I'm actually friends with him and telling him this, that's like a smack in the face. It's like, no, you put years into this stuff. I like you. I respect your work. Oh, man, but the AIs wouldn't do that, would they? Let me go into here. As much as I like Discord, Midjourney, if I go into here and I say, hey, imagine an army of tanks in the style of Thomas Kincaid. I'm not even going to use their newer AI, version 4. I'm just going to go with their default one, version 3 right now. I also need to jump to present. Okay. But look at that. An army of tanks in the style of Thomas Kincaid. You've seen Thomas's work, like these rich colors, how they change, the nice shadows, the greens, the waters. Look at that sky. It's so tranquil. Now let's put some tanks in there and let's see how that comes out. It's at 90% done. It'll be finished up in just a couple seconds here because it only takes like 20 seconds, 30 seconds to complete. Ah, look at that. We're starting to see those nice hillsides, those nice greens that we see in it. We see the waters coming out there, the nice hillsides. Hey, let's try this on V4 too, just for the heck of it. /imagine an army of tanks in the style of Thomas Kincaid. All right, so I'm using the V4. Oh, I didn't. --V4. Okay, now I'm using the V4 version of it. It's going to produce a different set of images, and we'll see what they look like anyway on the standard one, version 3, but then we'll also get version 4 to come out here in just a moment. There it is, version 4 is processing as well. Okay, yeah, and there's another set, and you can really see some of the Thomas Kincaid stuff popping out of there. And we'll get it for my new stuff in just a second too. But that's one of the points. Did this AI learn this ability to produce this by actually studying the same type of art concepts and the same painting skills as Thomas Kincaid did? No, it looked at a final image, at probably 10,000 final images of his work or fragments of pictures of his work. And like literally his work. And then it found the word Thomas Kincaid in it. And here's another image with Thomas Kincaid, and here's another image with Thomas Kincaid. And so it knows what Thomas Kincaid pictures look like. It has developed a way to redraw the pixels from all the pixels it copied in the first place to get these nice, rich Thomas Kincaid-like pictures. Now let's see, that's not the version 4. Here we go, version 4. Oh, this one's a little darker, but you can still see this nice picture. This really put it together well. But that's it. Where did it learn it? If all it ever did was was Thomas Kincaid pictures in the first place, or one Thomas Kincaid picture, no matter what entry you put in there, you would pretty much get that exact same picture back out. But somehow it's okay when they do this to 100,000 artists. That's not right. Okay, so what could they do to make things right? Well, they're trying really hard not to say that they're doing anything wrong. Now, there's another, I watched another video where they expressed this. I haven't backed it, I haven't gone to validate it. But they pointed out that one of the companies that produces the art image AIs also does the same thing for music. But on their music stuff, they specifically call out that they only use opted-in artist work. Artists who have specifically opted in, either by payment or by just interest in seeing the technology advance. But they have submitted their work to this. Okay, so they've submitted their work to this, and they're only going to use that. They even call out that it would be wrong not to do that. But what happens when you're a graphics artist? Well, screw you. What do you matter? Artists, the audio artists, they have large media labels behind them. We're not going to screw with them. They've got lawyers. They will go after you quickly. But, oh, you're an artist? Oh, yeah, there's like hundreds of thousands of you, and there's not really so much in the way of mass art studios and art rights. Most of you all handle it individually. So as long as we're careful just not to take from Disney, then we should be fine, right? No, I mean, we're already seeing this whole AI thing start to topple. Microsoft and GitHub, and I think it was a system called Smart AI. I might have the name of that one wrong, but they're getting sued right now. I don't know if they're in court yet, or if they're going to court, or what's going on with the current state of that. But they're being sued because they wrote an AI that effectively you write in a method header and code, and you don't fill in the actual code that makes it work, but you put a comment at the top of it that says what it's supposed to do. And then their AI will write the code for you. And it apparently does a really good job of this. That's pretty amazing. But it sounds like they also just took it from any source code that was publicly visible on GitHub to be able to do it. Now, just because it's publicly visible doesn't mean that you have full rights to it. Most of them are on an MIT license. Some of them are on a GitHub license. But either case, you're not allowed to just copy and paste that without at least attribution. In some case, purchases, some ways have very specific ways of how you have to declare your attribution, but that's called out in the legal guidance on it. Okay. But they're being sued right now, and I'm pretty confident they're going to win because all they have to do is show, hey, if you ran your AI only against my system to develop this, then your code would look exactly like mine. But you didn't. You did use hundreds or thousands of sources to generate this type of stuff. But my code is part of that. My code that you are not passing on the license, that you are not suddenly entering the MIT license sources of 6,000 different places that we pulled for this part of the code. And that's hard to do. Okay, so what can AI start to do differently? What do they need to be doing differently here? All right, we could totally have this work. Let's say that we put together a system where artists come in and they submit their work. Actually, let's go to like lynda.com. That was before LinkedIn Learning bought them, or LinkedIn bought them and became LinkedIn Learning. I released a couple training videos on there on UnityWorks, and I made money off of it. The way that their pricing model worked in general is that everyone who is able to get access to the content is generally paying in a certain amount of money for a monthly subscription, say $20 a month or something like that, or $10 a month, or I don't know what it would be. But anyway, they're paying into it, and then they're saying that, all right, they're going to take every video that gets watched, and they're going to say over a month's period of time, we had $6 million in income from all the people who came in to watch, and we've had 6,000 minutes being watched. Now this is like wildly off, I'm sure. I don't have the actual numbers here, but we end up they'll say, okay, well, if you represent 10% of all the minutes that have been watched, and it's $6 million that came in, you're getting $600,000 of that. Or we'll just cut it. We'll put in overhead expenses and say 50%. Okay, so you're getting $300,000 for that. Now, being an instructor that accounts for 10% of all of LinkedIn Learning stuff or all Udemy stuff is pretty much unheard of, or I don't imagine anyone does stuff like that. But that's the reality. I mean, that's a system that works. Okay, so instructors come in and they give their work, and then they get paid back based on the amount that other people want to look at it. That's how Udemy works. That's how lynda.com works. That's how LinkedIn Learning, to a certain degree, works. We could do the exact same thing here. When they're training their art AIs, anytime they're giving positive affirmation images, where they're saying that this is an image that represents a tank. In the keywords, we see tank. And so it starts to gather that fragments of this image qualify as a tank. And so with that mixed with other ones, it starts generating this overall structure of how these pixels all line up to produce a tank overall. When it's training its art, it understands that it has 20,000 images with the keyword tank in it. Great. Now, if someone produces an image and it's using the keyword tank and that's it, and we've had out of let's say 10% of all of our requests for images include the word tank this month, then and all your tank art comes from me, then 10% of the revenue for this goes to me, or minus like a 50% cut by the company or something like that. That would be really easy to do to just basically say, oh yeah, your stuff is in this. Oh, but it's also spread out a lot. There's like 200,000 people that are providing images with tanks. And then, you've submitted 1,000 images with tanks in it. And that's great. That's awesome. Thank you. But we also have all these other ones as well. So you get part of that. Now, we're also going to say that because it's such a small amount that you're actually earning, if as like a typical person on there being part of that keyword association, that you're making, you aren't going to make a buck. What was it? Quora.com had a similar thing where if you post popular questions, then you're actually making money back off of the ads that get posted on that and how much people are being driven through that are searching for those and finding Quora because of it. So you end up getting kickbacks from it. But despite thousands of views, I made like $3 or $4 off of Quora for my fun posts or interesting posts or whatever. I didn't make much money off it. But some people did. I think some people were making like $1,500 a week off this. And I don't know where they live, but depending on where you live, that's certainly a living. And in other places, it's certainly not. Okay, but that's a system you could design. Now, there's other attributes that go into this, like what actually qualifies as good art. So if we have someone who has 20 years experience who has submitted 500 tanks to this, and then we have someone else who basically is just using paintbrush to outline a bunch of tank images, and and they just really have no art skill whatsoever, and they're doing this. Well, they would be, if they submitted 500 and this really high quality person would be submitting 500, that model would obviously be giving them the same amount of pay, when people wouldn't be liking the ones that are presented from this original set. So things you can actually do for this. To help shape that out. You have to kind of split this out even farther. Remember the neural net where you have a bunch of these little nodes connected together that just basically say, hey, depending on the number values I get in from these different sources, I'm going to output a number value. And then that crisscrosses all across this matrix or this mesh, basically, of how all these nodes come together to basically decide, is this good or not? Is this what this keyword represents? We could get that information back out of it to start to describe what works and what doesn't. Because every time that we say that this image had a 5% impact on this, we could also model what that change was, what it represented inside of this. And we could say, hey, when people are approving this AI in the shape that it is, we can look back at the stamp for that keyword in that image and how it laid out the node mesh. And we can basically say that, or how it laid out the neural network, to basically give it a footprint of saying, hey, this one does not work. People are not liking the art that's coming from this one when we're training it off of Paintbrush. People are really liking it when we're developing it off of Maya or 3D Max or these other sources, Lightwave. And so we can start to split artists out. And we can say, okay, well, sorry, yeah, you're part of the keyword tanks, but your art has not been getting promoted. You're not part of the image. I think we really need to get that separation. Now, it takes a lot of data to do that. It's so much easier just to take all of the images and lump them into an average that you can apply, an average set of patterns that you apply to this stuff. But storing a footprint of each one of those is tough. That is really tough. If you were to store a low res footprint, like a thumbnail, and basically just compare it to the ones that are succeeding, that might be a reasonable way to do it, but I leave that in your hands. This is what needs to happen. We need to have ways to start getting this AI legitimate. We need you guys to depend on legal sources. The companies are not going to do this themselves. They've already been pushing the idea that, contact us to make sure your art doesn't show up in future AIs that we train. Putting the onus of responsibility to make sure that your stuff doesn't get copied, that your licenses don't get ignored, into your hands to go reach out to every potential company, public or private, that have, whether or not there's any public announcement at all that they're even doing this. And it's now your responsibility to go contact them before they start doing this and make sure that they somehow ignore all of your stuff. Because I'm not aware of any time before in the industry where companies have been able to take every piece of image art that you can look at online and suddenly say, well, we can disregard every one of these. We can disregard all the licensing that comes from it because we now produce a new image. It's based off of pixel patterns we took from hundreds of thousands of images. So how do you deal with that in court? Yeah, well, one thing, let me give you a couple examples. Here's my profile. This is one of the images that I asked it to make for me. I said a green iridescent rectangle frame with dramatic physics pull causing glowing distortions in time, comma, empty black background, empty black center. And it also happened to have put in here something that I am really confident is a slightly distorted version of "don't use this picture." It literally has a copy of it. Like, Midjourney, come on. This is literally right here. Images, something about the images. And it's like, that type of icon is a general type of icon to say you don't have the rights to use this yet. I've seen this in lots of different sites. Photostock is not one of them, or iStock or whatever the other ones. They just kind of stamp their name over it. But I've seen other ones where they use like the slash going through the camera to indicate, no, you're not supposed to use this. Not unless you purchase it. Once you purchase it, we're going to let you download a copy that doesn't have this stamp on it. This stamp that we put there to show when people are using it illegally. But it's just fragments. It's really hard to identify because they've figured out where these are, where the pieces go together to produce this, where the letters kind of go together. So you can see the word images was supposed to be part of this. But I'm not sure what the rest of it was. It may literally be a logo name here of the company that was selling it, and I don't know what it is. But can I use this? I am, but only in the case that I'm using it for a game for my daughters to use to learn reading. Something that they're only using in the privacy of our own home, and I'm not commercially releasing this. I remember looking at this stuff, and so I was producing a bunch of these. I wanted to create some nice glowy selection to go around a button to highlight when it was successful. So this is the stuff I was using, and these were ones to indicate that we shouldn't use it. But that was awesome when I found that one in there. Also, there's another one that I did in here where I looked at Time magazine. Oh yeah, and my kids love dragons, so one of the other things that I'm using on this is having it produce these various dragon arts, and they go chase a piece of cake or candy or something like that, which cake and candy are somewhere down here farther. There we go. And the more words that they get right in it, the closer the dragon gets to the cake. Anyway, so that's what I'm using it for. I'm not using this for commercial release. Pretty much no one is ever going to see this. You can look at my profile, but this is all stuff that Midjourney specifically is granting me the license to reuse commercially however I want. They do call out that if it happens to look similar enough to a source thing, that I could still be accountable for it. That the onus of that goes on to me, despite the fact that their AI is trained to make art that looks like this other people's art, or this other company's art. Despite the fact that their AI is trained to do that, the onus of responsibility for legal requirements falls onto me. They're really pushing off the legal boundaries all over the place. I mean, I guess you could argue the same thing with Photoshop or with Paintbrush, that if you use Paintbrush to copy real works in it, that they're not responsible for that. But those are tools. Those are very clearly tools. This is generation. This is creating stuff for you. Oh yeah, and here were some other tests. Time magazine. I said, hey, give me Time magazine cover. Time magazine cover. I mean, seriously, look at this. You recognize the font of the T? Oh, wow, that's it. There's the same fonts that it's using, the same this, the same that. Honestly, if I were to post this and say, hey, this is mine, I search Time magazine cover, it obviously isn't. It is copying the patterns of their pixels. And I guess that's going to be one of the future court cases, because this stuff's going to be hard to try. It certainly is going to be near impossible for any one of us individually as artists to go up against any one of these art AIs and say, hey, you're producing art in my style. Thomas Kinkade could. Hint, hint, Thomas Kinkade. But that would be expensive. These places are starting to make lots of money, and I'm willing to bet that when you start seeing the art image AI battles start to happen, that you're going to have some of these companies legally backing each other up. Because if one falls, more of them are going to start falling. Because once they've established the proof, the precedents, the rest of them will have to somehow figure out how to defend against it when it's already been shown in court that they're doing it wrong, that they're doing it illegally. But if I released this, if I took this image and released it and saying this is my own stuff, pay me to go ahead and use a copy of it, Time magazine, I'm really confident they would be coming after me. If I put some lines on Mickey Mouse and did the same thing, Disney would be coming after me. So the AI companies are basically trying to make it our responsibility to make sure that they don't. They're calling out that we need to tell them not to use our art. Let's tell them. I don't know how to do it. I'm not a lawyer. But I would really love to see places like Disney, Time Warner, or other ones start to recognize that, look, they're taking your images. They are copying fractions of your pixel arrangements and storing them in memory as averages with a percentage of other ones to be able to produce the artwork that they get at the end. Can it be done legally? Yes. It absolutely can, but they need the rights to those images that they're using. And honestly, as soon as one of these places comes out and starts saying, hey, we are using 100% opt-in art, that they are either paid or it is donated or it is public domain, or it is pictures that we as employees have just gone out and taken snapshots ourselves or drawn ourselves as employees of the company. That would be reasonable. That as soon as they do that, I'm going to be switching to that AI, even if I'm not getting quality results out of it, because I'm not using this for commercial stuff to begin with. Let's say that we do start seeing the dominoes fall in less than a year. We start seeing the dominoes fall, that these AIs start to fall apart. What do you think happens to those licenses? Does that license somehow mean that, oh, well, if I keep reusing this, Midjourney's going to be responsible for any of the legalities of it because they sold this to me? That's how that works, right? No, it's not. Everyone down the chain is responsible for that. So yes, Midjourney would be responsible for it. Of course, the way it's written, they try to pass that off onto you immediately. But they're trying to hide from as much of this as they can. There's even a thing that I've heard from some of these places that the parent for-profit company produces a child company, a subsidiary, that it produces under the licensing or the legalities of saying that it is a not-for-profit and it is a research company. Okay, great. Well, that means that I can look at any image online and I can train models. I can do all this stuff with any way I want to. Except they produced it with the sole intention of taking that trained art model and giving it to be used by a parent company, by a for-profit company. They even created a business model to describe this that doesn't exist in law today. Seriously, this stuff doesn't work. And the longer we let it go, the more we start to say, oh, okay, well, I guess I have to start going out and telling all the AI places that they can't use my work, expecting Thomas Kincaid to start reaching out to all of them and say, hey, you can't use my stuff. Don't put it into your art AIs. Because honestly, the way that they've written, they're saying their art AIs work, it wouldn't matter if an artist actually submitted that. Artists wouldn't have the right to say, please don't use my work to create other works. Just think about that statement for a second. And then think about the fact that this is becoming a billion-dollar industry, and this is going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. No, I'm not going to smack my artist friends in the face to basically say, I'm not going to pay you for your stuff. I can go use this AI to produce their stuff. Here's how I do this. So for one, I told you that I use it for internal things. It's just kind of fun to make stuff with it and see what it comes up with, for one. But then I also want specific things, like just a little tiny thing for my kids that's just going to be used in my house and never see daylight. But then I also am producing a video game. And I want artwork for that video game. I want styles and patterns for it. So I'm specifically generating that. So let's see, this one. This visual plan. And so I've got styles that this is all generated from Midjourney. Now, here's the practice of what I'm using it for. I am not taking this art and putting it into the game. I use this as a template to describe what work I'm going to have to do to build similar images. I used it to help give visuals to it so I could see an idea of what it looks like similar, and then get past that initial wild changes stage and come up with an art concept that I like. So I'm going to have to put the work into building this. Or I'm going to have to find artists who are interested in joining me, which, by the way, that's going to be some other videos later. If you have the skills and abilities to produce some things like this and are interested in joining into this, by all means do. Just reach out to me, post a comment here, connect to me on LinkedIn, whatever. If you feel like you can do some stuff like that and have some examples to get there, yeah. This is what I'm looking for. And if I get funded to be able to build this, this would be something that I would be looking to pay for. I can do this type of art. I have some pathways to get there, but I'm going to be pretty limited. My pathways are narrow. And I'm sure there are artists out there that can do all sorts of things just like this, with effects, with styles, with shaders, with putting in the texturing, to go over low poly art and add these effects to it to give it life. But I'm still expecting to do the work. I'm still expecting to pay the money. This is just to help bridge that gap, to get that communications barrier broken down. Now, there is certainly an argument to be said, and I feel like this is a gray area, and I question this myself right now. When you are going back and forth with an artist, that is often part of the paid experience with that artist, where they're going through several versions of it. They're making changes and kind of seeing what you like and what you don't like. Because the first time you describe what you want, upon seeing it, you start to find out that, oh yeah, people can take things in very different ways. It takes 1,000 words, very articulate words, to be able to describe a picture and get something remotely similar. I think that would be an interesting art jam where you basically take any original photograph or image, and without using that as a source image, tell an AI to go build that for you. Where you have to describe all the fragments of it and try to do it in a way where the AI will build that image. It's tough. All right. Anyway, I hope that if you have differences of opinions on this, please post it. I want to hear what you have to say, and I am definitely sorry for making this take an hour. It's long-winded, but I'm kind of passionate about this. I don't want to see people wronged. Maybe I'm still wronging people by using this and even sharing it on my YouTube channel. Maybe I am doing this, maybe I am misunderstanding something about the way the AI trains its models. That they're not using wave function collapse, that they're not taking patterns from the pixels, that they've got entirely other systems in mind. But then still, you describe it, and that could still be a same routine that you pass by as a human being operating on hand-driven tools on the computer to pass and copy and paste altered pieces from an original art piece. It needs to change.